Hey, and welcome to this new video. In this one I want to show you how I made this lava stream material using InstaMAT's element graph. And today I want to try something a bit different, as I already finished the material, so we won't be building it from scratch, but I will guide you through the graph and show you the nodes I used as well as the techniques that are needed to achieve this result. So yeah, I'd say let's just jump straight into InstaMAT and let's have a look. Alright, so this is how the material looks in InstaMAT, and before going into the graph I think I'll tell you a bit about my thought process on this first. So I wanted to have lava flowing between basalt columns and also quite a dirty look, so where we have the lava spilling onto the rocks here. And what's really always important about materials and 3D assets in general, you always want to have a bit of storytelling and the elements interacting with each other. So as an example, we have the lava bulging here onto the rocks that are at the edges. We have some of the rocks melting a bit away where the lava is flowing through, and we have also lava in the cracks so that it has the look that it's melting them away and flowing between them. This also happens a bit on the edges here, for example where this rock is or this one. I also wanted to have some hotter spots on the lava that is on the stone, so I implemented a slight emissive effect on those as well. And I also went for this brownish color scheme here because I saw a reference that looked quite nice and it had those brownish colors and I thought it looked quite nice. So I think that's that. For the parameters I don't really have too much, and I think I'm not going to talk much about them here. We have a parameter for the glow, for example, so we have the lava have cooled down completely and also glowing quite strong. And yeah, the other ones are a bit for the lava appearance, the lava on the stone here. Let's change that to 2K. So for example, we can decrease and increase the amount of lava that is spilling onto the stones. But yeah, let's take a look at the graph. So before going deeper into the graph, let's make an overview first. And this is by no means an optimized graph, as I had a time limit, as this was meant for November, so maybe not everything is made perfect. So some parts might need a bit of optimization, but everything worked fine, so this is how it looks now, and I think most of it is quite fine. Let's just take a look. So this is where I start with the rocks. This is all rocks, this is detailing of the rocks. And it goes on and on. This at the top here are the rocks as well. The lava starts here. Those are the details for the lava. And we finally are blending both in this blend height node here. This is our final height map output. This is the normal map. This is the start of the base color actually, and this is where I'm creating the map that I'm using for the gradient maps. But I'll explain it in detail soon. This is the actual base color, this is the roughness, this is the emissive channel. And let's maybe take a look at the maps. So this is the base color. That's the emissive channel, the normal map, the roughness, the metalness, which is obviously black. This is the ambient occlusion map, and this is the height map. So yeah, let's go to the beginning and let's start the actual tutorial. And I quickly created a preview node, which will make this tutorial a bit easier to follow, I think. So when I spawn it here and input something into the height channel and right click it and go to preview as 3D material, we will get this previewed in this 3D viewport. So for example, this is one of the nodes, and I go here and put this into the height channel here. We can see we have a different height output. So I think this will make it a bit easier to follow, and I think it's quite a good idea. But yeah, let's see. So how I started the material. I first used this hexagon fill node, as I thought it would be the best way to get those hexagon-shaped basalt columns. And what I first did, I processed it through the edge detection node here with just a small stroke width. I used the flood fill. And what I wanted to achieve here, I didn't want to have all of those basalt columns to be perfectly hexagon shaped and to have a bit of variance. So yeah, I used this flood fill here and flood fill to gradient as well as flood fill to color, which will be the mask. But the flood fill to gradient is the more important node here, as we cut out some of the edges of the hexagon node. So this is what we are doing with the histogram edit node here. And yeah, we are blending our initial edge detection node with the histogram edit node here, and we'll use a subtract. And this is the mask, so we still have a few of those more perfect hexagon shapes. Then I used the distance node. And what the distance node is doing, it's basically expanding our shape until it meets another cell and then it will terminate. So we won't have any gaps in between this. And when we then go over to the next node, it's an edge detection again. You can see we went from those perfect shaped hexagons to those a bit more chaotic ones. And in the next step, we are already creating some details for the rocks. So this is the first time I will be using this preview node here. It's not much yet, but we are using the flood fill on this edge detection here. And we'll use a flood fill to color. We will use this to have a bit of height difference between all of the columns. The flood fill to gradient, or actually the 3 flood fill to gradients, are for the first details. And for this, it's really important that every one of these nodes has a different seed. So as you can see, this has this seed here, this has another seed, and this is another seed as well. And at first, to get the first details in, maybe let's input this into the node here. I used a Perlin noise or a gradient noise with this flood fill to random direction and vector warping the gradient noise with this flood fill to random direction. So it's a bit more chaotic. And then we are using a minimum blend mode to go from this here to this. Or if you want to see it in this 3D viewport, we are going from this to this. So this will add the first details into our rocks. And in the next step, we are blending this flood fill to gradient node over our result here. So this then looks like this. And we do it once again. So we have some, so-called sculpted rocks. Let's maybe make it a bit darker. And in this step, we are just blending the flood fill to color node with a minimum, with the multiply blend. So as you can see, we are going from this output into this output. And also it looks a bit flatter. We now have different grayscale values for all of the rocks. As you can see, this looks all quite the same. And here we have from really dark stones to really bright stones and everything in between. And when I go here and use this normalize height, you can see it a bit better maybe. So what this does is it's basically an auto levels on our height. And in the next step, I'm introducing some cracks onto the rocks. So we're starting with this Voronoi node here, and we are inverting it and slope blurring it with itself by inverting the direction. And I'm doing this to have a bit less width on the cracks, so they are smaller. We are slope blurring it with this fractal sum noise here. And I will always show all of the nodes and its parameters, how they are set up, for you to have an overview, and maybe if you want to remake this, you have all the values in place. And yeah, the slope blur just has a low intensity, and we are also blurring the input a bit. Then we are using a levels to have a bit more range. We are iterating it, and to put it simply, what the iterate node does basically, it takes the input and uses a safe transform on it. So it introduces some repetition, so you have to be a bit careful how you use it. but it then blends it over the initial input. So you can see we have not only the bigger cracks here, but also those smaller ones. We are vector warping it based on this flood filter random direction node so that we break up the cracks and they are a bit more individually placed onto the rocks. So when I use this and use it as a height, and then if we compare it to this vector warp here, you can see that it's way more chaotic. We are using this histogram edit node as a mask. It processes the flood filter color node here. So we don't have cracks on all of the stones, but just on a few ones. And as we have different grayscale values here, we'll also have some variance on the strengths of the cracks. So let's input this into the height here. As you can see, we have cracks only on a few of those rocks. In the next step, we are slope blurring this. So what I want to do here is to implement some edge wear. So at first I'm slope blurring it with this fractal sum noise here. It's this one, and we're going to reuse it quite a lot through the graph. And then we are blending the slope blurred version with the initial version, using this edges here as a mask and blurring them a bit. So the edge detection is based on this distance node here. I could have inverted this one, but I wanted to have a bit brighter edges so we can cover more of the rocks here. So we're going from this to this, and it's just a slight effect. When we compare those two, it really just is a slight effect. And in the next one, we are blending this. That is meant to be some edge damage as well. So to show you how this is made, I just used this shape generator here and used a directional warp based on this clouds noise here. Then a slope blur based on this gradient noise. I used the tile scatter to scatter them around and make them small. And I also blended it with the spots noise to have a bit more variance within those shapes. And to have even more variance and some high frequency details, I blended this with this fractal sum noise here. Then I used an iterate node again to have a bit more smaller ones as well. And then the vector warp again with the flood filter random direction. Then again we are blending this with a subtract blend and with this mask here, so we only have the edges covered. And this here is a mask that I made for the rocks that are within the lava and at the edges, but I'll explain this a bit later when we actually need it. So going further, you can see that we already made space for the lava here. And I used this mask, so let's go a bit back. So this is how I made the rock mask for the lava and the rocks. And what I wanted to do here, as you saw the material, I want to have the lava stream flowing between those basalt columns. And I started here with the gradient symmetric set to smooth. I inverted it, so we have the white values at the edges and the black values in the middle. I directional warped it with this gradient noise to have a bit more variance. Then I used this flood filter color node, inputting the flood fill node we used on the edge detection for our hexagon shapes here. And I inputted this directional warp as a color, so we have this gradient basically where we start with bright rocks and then go over to more and more darker ones, and we are ending up with mostly black ones in the middle. Then I used a histogram edit node on this to solo out the mask. Then I used the flood fill to color to have some random rocks that I can blend into the middle. And then we blended it with our initial rock setup. So this is the result. We have already some space for the lava and our rocks in place. Then I used the distance node on this. Oh, let's just show it in the height channel here. So as you can see, this is where our lava will be flowing. Then I used the distance on this to get rid of the gaps. But in the next step, I made some smaller gaps by using a bevel on our initial hexagon shape here. Then I used the slope blur node with a turbulent Perlin noise input. I leveled it a bit. And then I blended it using a multiply blend with our rocks. So we just have really small gaps. So we've gone from this to this, which looks way more natural. The next step is a good example as why this graph is not really optimized. I blended the gaps over again. And there's really not much difference. I inverted the slope blurred gaps here and blended in this clouds noise. I wanted to have a bit more variance in the gaps, but yeah, it's probably really unnecessary as you don't really see a difference. In the next step, I directionally warped the whole rocks again to get a bit more variance. I used a direction count of 2 and an angle of 90. And I'm doing the same here again with a different angle. I didn't use a directional warp in 4 directions as the result is a bit different. So I did it like that. And yeah, we went from this to this. Then I used the slope blur again with a gradient noise with those settings. And here we are again introducing a bit more edge wear. So this is from this to that. Here are the first preparations for the lava blend, as I leveled those rocks so they are closer together in grayscale values. I blurred it slightly so we don't get the tessellation artifacts so much. It's really not visible as it's just a slight blur by 1%, but you can slightly see it. Again, this is a node that probably wouldn't be necessary here, but I used it, so yeah, it's there. Then I blended this result with the rocks mask here, so that we have pure black values where the lava is going to be blended. Then I used a custom grunge, but you could just use any grunge from the InstaMAT library, but as I like this really much, I used that. I processed it through a histogram edit, then used an iterate with a subtract blend. I blended it with the fractal sun noise from the beginning, processed through this histogram node or histogram edit node, and I used the subtract. And I also used this as a mask for the blend, so we are only blending on the rocks, but this wouldn't have been necessary again as this is fully black, so there wouldn't be anything happening. So the mask is really not necessary here. It introduces a bit of this grunge here. In the next step, I used basically a default spots 4 noise and slope blurred it with the fractal sum noise from the beginning. So this is the result. This is the default spots 4 noise. This is the slope blurred result. I vector warped it with the flood fill to random direction and blurred it a bit. The blur is basically for those edges here, so that are a bit cleaner while blending. And this introduces a bit of wear on the rocks themselves. The next step was to blend the rocks with the grunge again, to have a bit more wear. And this setup looks like that. So I used my custom grunge again with different settings, vector warped it with the flood fill to random direction and blurred it a bit. Then I blended that with a transformed clouds noise. It's this one here. And I just used a bit of an offset on this. As a mask, I used this here. So this isn't a flood fill to color, but I'm actually using the flood fill to random direction and use the channel split on that. So we have basically multiple flood fill to color nodes, not really flood fill to color nodes, but we have multiple versions where we can make different masks that affect the stones. So I have this version and this version. And I'm blurring it slightly again to not have those sharp edges here. The next step was to build the lava that is on the stones. So as you can see, we are getting some muddy looking lava that is supposed to be spilled out from the lava flow. And how I did this, I used the levels node on a clouds noise. I slope blurred it and blended it over the clouds noise again with an opacity of nearly 15 and a default blend. I directional warped the result with the clouds noise here and blended this with the fractal sum using a mask made out of this result here. And it's a subtract blend. Then I blended the fractal sum noise again with a default blend, so we get a bit of a grainy look. And I then used another custom noise I made. So this is this fine spots noise here. And you don't really need those noises for when you want to rebuild this material. You can just use something similar. It will, of course, have a slightly different look, but you will get to a comparable result. The fine spots noise looks like this. It's quite grainy. You could, for example, just use a dense noise. So this would be this here. Looks different, but it's also quite grainy. I directional warped it here and slope blurred it with itself. Then I did this blend here. So we went from that to, or actually from that to that. And I have yet another custom noise, which is a muddy looking noise. You could just use a dirt noise, for example. So we are going from this to that. This is just a default blend with an opacity of 25%. And before blending the height maps together, I like to use the bottom input, blur it a bit and blend it with the noise that is going to be on top with a multiply blend. So we are leveling up the result a bit, and this will lead to a more natural look of the blend. I'm leveling this a bit. And then we are doing this height blend here. So now we have the lava that is on the rocks, at least the first part, as I'm doing a second part here. And we used the rocks noise as a mask. I processed it a bit. So I used this and this and input it into this distance node. I blurred it slightly and used the slope blur node to have a bit of edge damage here. So for the second part of our lava that is built on the rocks, I used this shape generator, directional warped it in one direction with this Perlin noise here. I used a transform to get it to offset it a bit into the middle. I warped it with this Perlin noise, and I did a secondary version here. So those are all a bit different settings. I used this clouds noise to directional warp it again into two directions and blended it with, this is the output of this lava here, leveled a bit and blended it over so we get a bit more details into this. Same for that. This is the directional warp into two directions. I then used the guided scatter with this edge detect node as a mask here. Let's see how this is built. This is actually just the mask from the rocks and lava on the rocks blend. So those will only or mostly only appear on where the other lava is. And what I could have done here probably, as I used two guided scatters, one for bigger shapes, one for smaller shapes, I could have used both and just used two inputs here, so we would still have a bit more variance, so this would be better, but it seems I overlooked that. So yeah, there's always room for improvement. But then we are blending those together, using a directional warp into two directions with an angle of 0. We are using the clouds noise here. And then the same one with an angle of 90, so they are mostly in the same spots where they were in the beginning. And yet another directional warp with this clouds heavy node here, or noise. And the final step was this iterate node here. And this is going to be blended onto our rocks. So this is the mask I created first. And we are using this blur with a mask input, so we level up the spots where the blend should happen. So as you can see, the lava will be blended into here, or the additional lava. And we leveled this up. And here we are doing the blend. And it's just our rocks input. So this is our result from the blend height. And this is basically the end result of our rocks. And we are going to take a look at the lava now, as the blend happens here already. So this is that. So let's take a look at the lava now. It starts here. And as I already did a lava material in a different software, I wanted to go a different route this time. And yeah, of course, I wanted to improve it and go a different route. So I started with this shape generator node here, and this is just a circle with softness value set to 1. I used the tile scatter node with the following settings. Let me input that into the height of the preview node. I used the slope blur on that. And also an iterate node. So the values for the slope blur are like that. The iterate is set up like that. And to get rid of those sharp edges here, I use the blur. I used a directional warp with an angle of 90 degrees and an intensity of 1. And this is just the base of the lava, so those are the shapes where we will warp our... Yeah, I don't know how to call that, but this is just for directional warping the main shape, basically. But in general, this is also the flow direction of the lava. I used this slope blur again, so I slope blurred the result of the directional warp with itself. That looks like that. I used this Perlin noise to warp the result. I blurred it again. And I warped it again with a different Perlin noise. And I also used the levels. And a directional warp in 2 directions with an angle set to 19 and an intensity of 0.19. So that looks like this. And now for the main details. I basically started with this clouds noise. Or actually, I think the main start is here. Those are just for blending in and warping. So the start was this gradient noise here. Gradient symmetric, actually. I made it smaller by transforming it and then blurred it. I used the levels. As you can see, the blur here, the fall off or the gradient is quite smooth, and I wanted to have it not as smooth. So this is where the levels node helped. I used that gradient linear node and blended it into the output here with a minimum blend. Then I used the tile scatter, so that looks like that now. And this is the result of the tile scatter. Then I made some more noise. So this is where we started with the clouds noise and then slope blurring it with itself, blurring it, then directional warping it with the lava flow. I then used an auto levels on that. So this already looks quite interesting. I used that as a mask first to blend in this gradient symmetric, so we get a bit more variance into this noise here. So those will be actually our lava shapes or our lava main shapes. I used a transform to rotate that and a histogram edit to isolate some of the features. I warped it and I didn't input any noise. As with InstaMAT, you have this input preset here. So we are using this noise basically to warp this result. Then I did a slope blur with this fractal sum noise from before. I used an iterate on that. And this looks quite noisy now. But that's not a problem. I blended this result with a clouds heavy noise. So this is basically all for variance. Then I used this output to subtract it from that. And as you can see, those black lines here will give us really nice variance in the lava itself, or in the flow. I blended it with the fractal sum again to get a bit of grain going on. I used this spot 7 noise to subtract it from this output here. And I also slope blurred it with this result here, or output. And now we are blending both together. So that looks like this. And then we are taking our lava base, this here, to directional warp this shape here. And that looks like this. So we are getting closer to our actual lava look. I also blurred it slightly. This is set to 2%. I used an anisotropic noise and blurred it slightly to slope blur this result so we get those directional elements or features going on. And then I used, this is, good question, this is the spot 7 noise, which is directional warped with the lava base again. And blurred quite much. Then I used the histogram edit to extract a nice mask from it. And then I blended the slope blurred version with this blurred version here. So we have some spots where we have this directionality, and in other spots there is not so much directionality. And in the next step, I blended this result with the lava base. So we get a bit of height difference as well. And everything looks much smoother. I then used these auto levels to normalize the ranges. And then we have two roots again, where one is a slope blur with itself. And the next one is also a slope blur, but with way lesser intensity. So we have this and that. Then I blended it together. So again, we have a mix of both of those. And I used the clouds noise, processed through a histogram edit node for a mask, and used this as the mask input. In the next step, I'm blending this result with the output here. This is a default blend. I whipped the anisotropic noise slightly, also without an input. I just use the default noise that is implemented in the node. Then I slope blurred this result with the warp. I slope blurred it again with itself. And a slope blur again with, I think this is the spot 7 noise, but blurred. Yes, that's correct. Slope blur again with the spot 7 noise, which is not blurred. And then we are blending this result with this one. And we are using the blurred version of the spot 7. Oh no, this is actually my custom grunge. So I used this to create a mask. So I blurred it and Then use the histogram edit node on that. And this is our mask. So we now again have a combination of both of those outputs here, this and that. And we could actually make a parameter out of that. I think this would be quite nice. Then I use the high pass node on this result here. And a histogram edit. So I wanted to extract the highest values of this and use that as a mask. So we just have the tops, not the crevices. I inverted it, so we now got the crevices. I blurred it. And then I blended the inverted version with the non-inverted version. And also blended in a noise. So this is my fine spots noise. And again, you could use any noise that is fitting. And at first we were blending, I think this is the fine spots noise as well. Let's quickly take a look. So yeah, this is the slope blurred version of my spots noise. And I directional warped it with the lava output here, with this one. So that looks like this. And those are again some additional details. So it looks like that now. It's just a slight blur probably. Actually, it's the node where we have the parameter for the lava liquidity. And as a mask, I'm again using this one here. And then we are finally blending our details for the top. So we have a bit of grain going on. The next step is blending this result with this auto-leveled processed clouds noise. And so this was just for height variation, I think. So as you can see now, we have introduced a bit of more variance in the height. So this is without, this is with it blended in, and as a mask, this looks like a clouds heavy noise, I think. No, actually it's this one. Sorry, that wasn't the mask. It's this one. So it's the spot 7 noise. And the next step was to blending in the spot 7 noise onto it, or subtracting it actually. So we get some more details. In the next step, I used the directional warp on my custom grunge. I think that's it. At least it looks like it. So yeah, it is. And I directional warped it with the spot 7 noise, which already is directional blurred. Then I blurred the result slightly. Blended that in using a mask created from my spots, from my fine spots noise, blurred and histogram edit to get more white values going on. And again, you can use basically any noise. It could have been just a clouds noise or something. It's just for the mask, but yeah, I wanted a bit of variance and a personal touch, so to say. So I used my custom noise here. Then I used a levels node to get a bit more range. this was blended with the base of the lava to get a bit more height variance, as you can see. As you can see here, it's quite evenly, and here we have some deepening. So that looks like that. In the next step, I blended the inverted version of the lava and slope blurred it a bit. And yeah, added it by subtracting it, so we get a bit more gaps. It's again just a slight effect, so you can see it here, for example. The next step was to add this one, so that is this noise here. This is a clouds noise, slope blurred, and directional warp with the lava base, and then an auto levels is used. And I used the rocks mask to only apply that in the middle, and so I inverted the mask in the blend node. So it doesn't affect the places where the rocks are. And I think I did this quite at the end, so when the lava was already finished and I had some issues with the height, I made this blend here. And in this part is where a lot of the magic happens, so that the lava is interacting with the rocks. So I'm using this directional warp here. As you can see, we have those warped places here. So this is where the rocks are. And here it's not yet there. And this is basically quite simple to achieve. I'm using this blurred mask of the rocks and just directional warping it into one direction. The angle is set for one of the nodes to 217 and the other one to 90. And we need both, as we are just blurring, as we are just warping into one direction. So when just using one of these nodes and just warping into one direction, it would look wrong. So for example, let me make this bigger. So as you can see, this side here looks correct, so where the lava is bulging towards the rocks, but this side is looking wrong. And when I preview this node, it's the other way around. This side looks right and this one looks wrong. This might make a few issues with the stones here, but I didn't really have time to solve that. So I made it quite easy. I used this shape generator here, which is just a box, and we have the white on the top and the black in at the bottom. It's quite in the middle, the cut. I blurred that. And then I blended both of the directional warps together using this as a mask, and it's just a default blend with 100%. And when I now input the result of those, you can see the lava is bulging correctly. This one or this side is bulging towards the stones and this one as well. So again, around the rocks, there are some issues, but yeah, I didn't really have time to solve that. I'll probably fix that in a finished version when I also optimize the graph and such. But I don't think it's really a problem. It looks still quite nice. Then I wanted to have a bit more details on the tops of the lava. So I used this as a mask. This is a histogram select node which processes this output here. And we try just to have the brightest values separated. This blend is unnecessary, so just forgot to delete it. And this one as well, it seems. So let's get rid of those. And this is just a blend with a spots for noise. So we get a bit more variance into this. Then I'm blurring that. Then I use the save transform on, yeah, this is basically my mud noise, which I showed you before. I leveled it. So mud noise, save transform, and levels. Then I'm blending it into the lava here. So those are some extra details. Then I'm leveling that. And then basically the same thing as I did with the rocks and with the lava that is on the rocks. I used the rocks mask, inverted it, blurred it and blended it into the lava or multiplied it. So it makes it easier to high blend it with the rocks. So as you can see, the sides are quite flat where the rocks are, and this lava here is displaying correctly. The next blend was actually with the edges from the rock, to have the edges a bit more bulging. So I can show you how I did that. I basically used this inverted rocks mask, blurred it, and then subtracted the result from the rocks mask. So we got that. Then I blurred it slightly and blended the noise into it. So again, for a bit of variance. And then we have a nicer bulging here. And the last step for the lava was to blend in this noise here. This looks a bit like, yeah, height to curvature. Let's see what I did here. So I used this lava as an input for the intensity input of the directional verb, to directional verb the fractal sum noise. I used this one, so this is probably the spot 7 noise with the lava base, and the directional verb again with this result here. Then I blended this together using default. Then another blend with the fractal sum noise. Then I used the height to curvature on that. And I blended it into this. This is a parameter and it's set to 0, so we won't see anything. This is also for some additional grain if we would like to have that. And yeah, in the next step, I'm blurring the lava, blending it into the rocks. Actually, this is set to 0, so we don't need that. Let's get rid of that. Actually, this was wrong. Need this one. Yeah, at least I can fix a bit of this material while doing the tutorial. So these are our rocks, leveled, blended with this noise. So this is something I wanted to have only for the rocks that are within the lava here, for the melting effect and on the edges. The effect is quite slight, so I probably should increase it a bit. So this is based on the Voronoi pattern here, processed through an edge detection, and a flood fill is used on that. It's basically a similar setup as with the stones at the beginning. So we use a flood fill to gradient 3 times. Every one of these nodes has a different seed value. But that's great with InstaMAT. So when you copy a node, like this flood fill to gradient, for example, it automatically has a different seed. Then we are blending it with the maximum blend. With the maximum blend again. Then we are using a flood filter color to get a bit of height difference between the individual cells. A flood filter gradient again, and this time with a multiply blend to get a bit of slope variance. Then we are using a distance node to again get rid of those gaps. Then I'm directional warping it in 4 directions with this clouds heavy noise here. Then a slope blur with the same noise. Then a blur by just really tiny intensity. Then we are blending it into the basalt columns using this as a mask again. So this makes the rocks that are directly connected with the lava a bit more broken, and it looks a bit more like they are melting away. So this could again be a bit better, but yeah, again I had a time limit, so it's all I had time for. But I think it's suffice. And then we are blending our lava with the rocks, and we have this result here. So this is nearly the finished height map. Actually, it is the final height map. Just using auto levels, which I don't really need. But yeah, now we are finished with the height here. And the next step will be to apply some color. And for the base color, I always like to work with gradient map nodes. But for this to give you good results, you need a nice grayscale map first. And it depends a bit on the material, but for something like that, where we have rocks and lava, which is also a liquid rock basically, you want to have a quite sharp one. And this is the result which I'm mainly using here. If you can see, it has really nice details on it. And to achieve that, I used the final height output and first created a normal map of it, then a curvature map with those settings, so nice sharp. I sharpened the height map a bit, used an AO with quite high values, so that is really dark. I also used gradient map on the height map with just full green and red colors. And let's actually start with that. I used this fractal sum noise and vector warped it with the gradient map here. So it really warps nicely around the shapes. It's not really much visible as the intensity is quite low, but it's enough for that. And here I blended the ambient occlusion node with the sharpened height map. This is the AO, this is sharpened height map, and this is our result. I blended in the normal to curvature for more details. And then I blended in the grain from the vector warp node here. And I sharpened it up again. I used the height slope extract on the height map to extract the slopes here. I used it 2 times, so one is in one direction basically and the other one in the other direction. And I'm blending this together with a maximum blend. Then I used a blur on the height map and blended in with a divide mode with the height map. So we get something like an AO map, but we only have the crevices here in black. This is actually for later. So this is the blend of the height slope extract blended with the fractal sum noise again. And this is our end result. And I'm not only using this end result here, but also some of the steps in between, like this, for example. So this is actually the first step, and here's one of the gradient map dynamic nodes. And I picked all of those gradients from real life references. And I made a few variations, blended them together. A different color scheme. blended it in. Actually, let's input it here. So this is our first color pass. I made an additional gradient map, used the HCL node, which seems to be unneeded as it's set to 0. And I blended this one with the first pass and used the histogram select on the height map to extract some of the parts of the lava. So again, this is for variance. I used the gradient map on this output. And again, blended it in with just a default blend. I used an HCL node on this to darken it up. Took my custom grunge and processed it through this iterate node. And I used that as a mask. So we get some variance going on. I used another grunge, used just a solid color and blended that in. Then I wanted to have some variance in the stones, so I used a flood fill to random color. Used this output here and made it a bit brighter. Blended it with this output. This is a bit messy as I started with the rocks here and actually the lava passes are at the top here. So maybe let's just continue with the lava first. I used the height to slope extract blends here to blend in a gray color or a grayish color, and this is the opacity mask. Then I used another gradient map dynamic on this output. And somewhere in between I decided that I didn't like the color, but I did like the general look of it, so I just use an HCL node. And again blended it in with a default blend. So this is a custom dust node. You could probably just also use the material mask dust, where you'd also need the AO, the normal map, and let's input the height as well. So this is just to show you that you can also make this with InstaMAT's built-in nodes. Looks a bit different, but you could set it up. You could increase the AO or decrease the AO intensity, normal intensity, grunge. So you can come really close. But again, I always like to give my materials a bit of a personal touch, so I really like to use my custom nodes. I use the levels on that. It's unnecessary again, so let's get rid of that. And I used it a second time, so the output here is a bit different than this one. I blended in a white color. So we have some dust or ash in the crevices of the lava. As this was a bit too bright, I used an HCL node again and darkened it up a bit. Then I used this dust node here, blended with my custom grunge and gray color. Use that as a mask to pronounce those a bit more. Then I used an HCL node again with no changes, how like it seems. So let's get rid of that. But this one is way darker than the initial input. But this is just for those details here, where I'm blending it in here. And this is already blended with the rocks color path. So maybe let's go back and explain the rocks. So we ended up here. So this was the color for the rocks. I used an HCl to darken it up. I used my custom grunge again to make a bit of this ash detail. Then I used the mask for the rocks from the height output. From the blend height output, actually. And the output from, this should be the lava on the stones mask. Blended with both of those. So let's go a bit back. So this is the mask of this secondary lava on the rocks details. And the other one was probably this mask here from that blend. So this is the result from blending both of those masks. So we are only affecting the lava on the rocks details and blended it here. This is a blend again for a bit of color variance. It's the same mask, I think, but blended with the edges here. Maybe let me show this as well. This is basically the edges of all the rocks that are interacting with the lava. So I used the rocks mask here and used an edge detection on this and then blurred it slightly and also blended it with this. I subtracted it from this mask. Then it goes in here. And the last step was a bit of additional details. So this is some dirt on the lava that is on those rocks. This is again this mask. Blended with my custom grunge and leveled a bit. Then I took this map, which I showed you before, which is this one. So the blurred height map divided with the initial height map. So this is just to darken up the crevices a bit. Then I blended in a normal to curvature slightly. And for this, it's really important that you don't do it too much, otherwise the material will tend to look a bit stylized. I blended in the emissive color. And I changed something because I saw that I forgot to do a blend here. And this doesn't really look good. So let's get rid of one of those high slope extract nodes and just use this one. And then we don't need the blend. And this effect here might look a bit too strong, so we could always go in and change the colors a bit. I mean the ash that is in the crevices. So we could darken it up, but I'll leave it as is for now. And this would be our mostly finished base color. I just used this material effect dust node. And yeah, of course I blended in the emissive color, which I'll show in a few seconds. And I used the material finalize node as well. So this is the base color without the roughness. Let's disable the preview. So we don't have any emission going on and no roughness currently. So let's take a look at the normal map first. So the normal map is a blend of different normal maps. So I took the lava on the rocks here and this noise and combined that. Then I used this mask, which is the lava on the rocks mask, and blended in it with the default normal map. And I did that as I wanted to have a bit more normal details on those. So I not always do that. So for most materials, the normal map is just a height to normal node from the height map. But in this case, I needed some more details on the lava that is spilled onto the rocks. Let's input it here. So as you can see, this is the result with this normal map. And this would be the result without the normal map. So I'm missing a bit of details. So the AO map is self-explanatory. It's just a regular height to AO node. Then for the roughness, I took the height map, inverted it and leveled it down a bit. So I like to do this as for many materials when the top spots will be a bit more shinier as they are worn out. But this also really depends on the material. For basalt columns and for lava, I think this should be mostly true. So I wanted to have the tops a bit more shiny. Let's actually input it into the roughness here. In the next step, I wanted to have my custom grunge on the stones. So I just blended it in using an add mode with an opacity of 16. So those spots will be a bit rougher. Next step was the same mask, but inverted, the same grunge. And I wanted to have it as shiny as spots on the lava itself. In the next step, I took this dust here, added it in. Next step was the cracks. And cracks are also a case that you want to have rough in a material, most likely. I think the only exception for this is when you have a really soft metal which has some cracks, so those tend to be shiny, but on most of the materials the cracks will be rougher. And actually for the cracks noise, as with the way I set the material up, I had some issues implementing them. So this is the mask. But let's go to the back. Let's go to the beginning of the material. Here I'm just subtracting the lava mask from the cracks. Here I am subtracting the lava that is on the stones from the cracks. And here's the actual cracks. So the issue here was, let's go here. I blended the cracks into the stones before I warped everything. So for example, I had them blended in here. And I did a directional warp here, a directional warp here, a slope blur here. So to have this rock really at the place where they should be, I have to reuse all of those nodes that are warping the cracks and do the same with the cracks, so they are in exact the same spots. So as you can see, this matches nicely. But this wouldn't match. And when I take the initial cracks, that would be that, and go to the warped version of the rocks, you can see it doesn't match. So I had to do the same here, called it cracks mask. And then I was able to blend them into the roughness, which again happened here. Sorry. Here. Then I also wanted the gaps between the basalt columns to be rougher. So I used this mask and multiplied it with the rocks mask, so we do not have them on the lava. And this is made by, let's see. Ah, that's this. So I inverted this rocks here. This. I inverted that, blended it with the rocks mask or the lava mask. Then I used the high pass to have it easier to extract the cracks, which I did here. It's again not perfect here, but I think it's quite nice as I also have some of the cracks and we have a bit of variance in between. Then I blended it with this, so we don't affect the stones that are touching the lava. Then I added my custom grunge again. I added the dust once more, as I think I did it here with the other mask already. So this was an add, and this is an add as well. Then I added the spilled out lava. And the final step was to add the darker spots that are on the lava here. And here I did a subtract to have them a bit more shiny, as I thought of that the lava would be fresher. And that's the roughness. So I think everything that's left is the emissive channel now. So for the emissive channel, I started with the AO map. I used only the last lava output. Used an ambient occlusion node on that. Used the histogram edit here. Used orange and a red solid color node. Blended it with the default blend mode using this as a mask. And inverting the mask as well. So where the crevices are, the lava appears to be hotter. I also used an average color node and a replace color HSL, as I wanted to make a parameter out of that. so that we could have different colors. So let's just do it. Emissive color. Where's our preview node? Okay, we probably need a mask. Let's use that. I know that won't work as the node is not set up for that. But we can see it here like this. So we could change the emissive color to blue or something. And then we can just pick this and we have our original color on that. So anyway, I took this, which I showed you before. This is the mask for the bulging of the lava. And we have only the lava at the edges affected by this. I used the levels on that. I also inverted the ambient occlusion node here. Used the histogram edit on this. I blended this together. And this is our first mask input for the color here. So we could probably use this as the emissive channel now. And we already have those. Let's see where this is from. It's the actual mask, that was the wrong one. It's basically the lava on the stones, processed through auto levels, histogram edit, an ambient occlusion node, and blended together here. Histogram edit again, and the levels. And that's this. And we are blending this here. Now we have the edges. So I wanted to have this effect where, like here, for example, where we can see that the lava is flowing into the rocks and at the places where they are melted. We use the blend node with a default blend and this and that and this as the mask. The next step, we use the cracks, as I wanted to also have the cracks of the rocks that are affected by the lava. So this was the cracks mask, or the cracks themselves, blended in with just the stones that are touching or interacting with the lava. This blend is useless. And we have this. This is just a subtract, I think, or a default blend to only have the lava affected. And then we blended this together with that. And yeah, then I blended this into the base color. And again, just use the material effect dust and the material finalize node. And there we have the exact same material. So I think that's it for this tutorial, guys. Thank you for watching, and maybe tell me in the comments if you liked the way I presented this material, or if it's better if I just build a material from scratch and record it then and explain what I'm doing, because I'm really not sure. This is the first time I did something like that. And in some parts I thought it was quite good, but in other parts where we have to go back and forth so much, I thought that it's maybe not the best way to present a material. But I hope you could follow everything and that you can rebuild this material if you'd like. So yeah, I think that's that, and thanks for watching and see you next time.